Santa Claus, Bill McReynolds on CNN. Did Santa Claus kill JonBenet on Christmas night? We are going to look at this facts, and then I'm going to tell you who I think wrote it. Well, look at the handwriting contained in this fax compared to the ransom note. Do they look similar? And keep in mind the fax is pixelated. It's made up of little squares that makes the words. So it's not exactly like the original writing. So here's a look at the first page of the ransom note, and look at the word country, and then country from the fax. Now let's look at the word at and the capital A and compare it to the A from the fax. Now moving on to the second page, look at the little a's in chance, tactics, and that, and this A from the fax. Then take a look at the word killing, and then the word killings from the fax. Now looking at the last page of the ransom note, and looking at the word family and comparing that to the word family from the fax. What do you think? And then looking at the word killing compared to the word killings from the fax. And looking at the word that from the ransom note compared to from the fax. And then last, the word John. How does it compare? Now, Bill McReynolds started playing Santa Claus in the early 1990s, and Patsy saw him at the Boulder Mall on Pearl Street and asked him to play Santa Claus at her house. And I believe this took place in 1994, and then in 1995, and then in 1996, Patsy wasn't going to have the Santa Claus party. Now these next three passages are from the newspaper. It was the kind of behavior Santa Claus would appreciate, or at least the kind of behavior noticed by Bill McReynolds, the man the Ramseys hired to play Santa at their annual Christmas parties. Patsy picked him up in part because she loved the festive gold glitter he sprayed into his natural white beard. At his first party in the Ramsey home in 1995, McReynolds said he was instantly struck by JonBenet's quiet smile and her pensive, almost retiring ways. He saw within her what he described as an angelic glow. I felt very close to that little girl. I don't really have other children that I have this special relationship with, not even my own children or my own grandchildren. Now in this video, not only are we going to look at Santa Claus, but we're going to look at Mrs. Claus and their children. And so their three children are Jesse, Jill, and Tristan. Now Santa's oldest son, Jesse, was born in New York, and he was age 38 when JonBenet was murdered. And he got married in 1981 and was working at Martin Marietta Aerospace in Denver. And then his life took a turn, and he was actually arrested in Arizona and served time for a gas station robbery where he was actually charged for kidnapping because he moved the cashier from point A to point B at gunpoint, and he served time for that. Now, Santa's second child is Jill McReynolds, and she was age 31 at the time of JonBenet's murder, and she was born in Texas. And when they were living in Boulder, they moved there around 1968. And when Jill was age 9, her and her friend were abducted by some man, and the man molested her friend. And I'll get back to that later. Now, Santa's youngest son was born in Colorado when they were living in Boulder, and he was age 25 when JonBenet was murdered. And he was working at a bakery called Just From Scratch. And he actually delivered some bakery items to the Ramsey house prior to JonBenet being murdered. And Patsy talked about it during her police interview. Now, on December 23rd, 1996, that's the party that Patsy had because Bill McReynolds, Santa, asked her to have the party. Patsy wasn't planning on having that party. It was on the insistence of Santa. And it was the first party where Santa's wife showed up at the party. And it was the party where the 911 call was made to the police, and they said it was some kind of mistake. And maybe Santa's wife took one of Patsy's notepads. Now, in the mid-1970s, Doris Janet McReynolds, Mrs. Claus, was a playwright and a critic for the newspaper. And her first play, Kathia, was a suspense drama set in San Francisco in the 1950s, and it tells the story of a young model and her mysterious elderly landlady. Then something very unfortunate happened to Mrs. Claus's daughter. She was abducted by a man driving around in a car looking to pick up little girls. And so at age 9, Jill and her friend were picked up by this man in a car, and her friend was molested. And here you can see part of the police report, and it says in the bottom left, Jill McReynolds, and gives her address. And so now if we look in the 1974 Boulder telephone book, at the bottom there you can see it says William, that's Santa, Janet, that's Santa's wife, and then it gives the address 2990 18th Street and the phone number, which is the same as the police report. And after that occurrence, Janet McReynolds wrote her second play, Hey Ruby. And that play was about Cynthia Likens, who was a teenage girl who was brutalized by a gang of teenagers in the basement of her house that she stayed at. And that play that she wrote did pretty well. It played in Los Angeles, it played in Denver, and it played in New York in 1976. And it says here, a play by Janet McReynolds about the ritual murder of a teenage girl. Now here on top is some writing from Mrs. Claus, Janet, from 1962. And she wrote a lot of capital letters, and she wrote some numerals, so we can compare her writing to the ransom note. And so you can look like at her small t and see that it's like the ransom note. And you can see other letters that are similar to the ransom note, like those little A's. They're like the ransom note. And you can compare Janet's 9s to the 9 in the ransom note in 1997. So here we can look at the SBTC. So here on the left is Janet's S. How does that look compared to the SBTC? And then here's Janet's B. So how does that compare to the B? And then here's Janet's T compared to the ransom note. And then she didn't write a C, so there's no C. But she wrote the word Jones, and you can compare that first part to John. And do the J's look similar? So I believe that Janet McReynolds wrote that fax, and she wrote the ransom note, and she wrote it in Patsy's notepad that she took from their house. But she's not the one that broke in that night. That was somebody else. And that person was Tristan McReynolds. He's the one that went through the basement window, abducted JonBenet, and for some reason strangled her and killed her. Oh no? Here's a letter to the editor. Press isn't doing its job, by Joel, Tristan McReynolds, and Mary. And it talks about the CIA, Contras, hostages, foreigners, disseminating facts, and it talks about hostages several more times. Now the Boulder police questioned Santa Claus and his wife because of these similarities. I don't know how well they investigated their sons, but after the murder of JonBenet, Santa and his wife went off on vacation to Spain. Then they came back and they were questioned, and then a lot of suspicion grew about them, and then they moved away out of state. Well, this ends this episode of Unsolved, and that's it for today. And tomorrow night, Saturday night, another episode of the Zodiac Killer Case. So I'll see ya.